This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome back to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Dylan, how is it going today?
Great. The sun is shining and the tank is clean.
The tank is
clean. The tank is clean.
What tank? We don't have fish.
That's true.
But we have a pond, and there are a lot of geese on the pond.
And sometimes there's a falcon that swoops down and does get a fish.
That's true.
And then brings it up and eats it.
Can I tell my hope story now?
Sure, switching the order.
Yeah, just because you brought up the bird.
Yeah.
We saw an eagle the other day in our yard, not in our yard, but like in the sky above our yard. And I've never seen an eagle as high as this eagle was. It was so high, and it looked like it was just like gliding through the wind, and it was so majestic, and it was going in circles. And then a bunny ran through our yard, and we were wondering if the eagle was trying to go after the bunny. And then eventually it just slowly flew away. It was just so majestic and beautiful.
Oh, the food chain.
Wait, it just reminded me that the other day, like before this, a different day, the falcon that's in our area was in our front yard in the bush right in front of the window as well. So those are my hope stories because nature is cool.
Oh, that's cool. and I'll say, I want the bunny to survive. I understand the food chain and that the eagle needs food. I wanted to see a strike down.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see it be successfit. I just wanted to see this eagle circling around, just dive.
Yeah.
It just
like National Geographic in our backyard.
Yeah, because it was majestic. This thing was up high, it was floating around. I didn't see it flap its wings once.
No.
It was just on this wind cycle and just woof, woof. And then when it decided it was gonna leave, it like took off.
Yeah.
Like it looked like as fast as a plane. I know it's not as fast as a plane, but it looked as fast as a plane from where we were sitting.
Maybe is there a science that like the weight to speed ratio of an eagle versus an airplane?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
Anyways.
Should I go to my hope story or should I save mine for the end?
Save yours for the end. That was like a little teaser, and now we'll get into the question.
Okay.
Unless you really want to share it now.
Yeah, we'll sandwich hope story.
All right.
Yeah, let's get to the meat.
Enjoy your sandwich today. All right, this is from a listener named Nick. As a coach, I want to cultivate hardworking athletes, but I find my young team lacking the competitive edge. Do you think that some people are just born with it, like they just have it, and others don't? Or can I coach this in my athletes to become more, like have that competitive edge more? And I don't know if Nick is like a boy Nick or a girl Nick.
Yeah.
But welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Nick, thank you for your question. I have answers, but I think I have more questions than I do answers, because it's almost like you give this general answer, but gathering more data is always helpful in this answer. And because it's not so much like a back and forth, we got to kind of assume some things and that. So my first question is, how young are these athletes?
Fair, yeah.
Like, are we talking like 4 years old playing t-ball or flag football or soccer or hockey? Because let's take a 4-year-old playing hockey. That 4-year-old's drive is not to win hockey. It's to not fall on their face while skating. You go to a t-ball game with 4 or 5-year-olds, and I don't think there's many that are...
Your nephew definitely would have been one.
Yes. Yeah. I mean...
Our nephew.
There's this quick story. He's playing t-ball, and you get an option in t-ball now, like, do you want to hit it off the tee or do you want the coach to soft toss pitch it to you? Nephew wanted to like pitch it to me. He rips it down the third baseline, almost takes off this kid's head, who is sitting on the base playing in the dirt. And at that moment, I was like, you gotta get this kid out of t-ball, because like he's gonna hurt. He sprint in the park home run, like that was like his every at bat, and I'm like, this is dangerous.
He wanted to win.
The difference though was that when he was like 1.5 years old, like that's when he started playing.
Yeah.
And it was the environment that he grew up in. That's what my brother, that's what myself, that's what we were always doing. And so him being in that environment, like that's what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
And that helped to drive his competitiveness because he wanted to do that because he grew up with it.
Mhm.
Some kids don't have that. Some kids, it's like they're the first one in their family to play that sport. Like for me, in our family, my brother was the first one in our family to come home and say, "Hey, I want to go play basketball."
Mhm.
And like he went and then set that path forward for me. But like his first day in basketball was probably not like, "I'm here to dominate." It was probably like, "Hey, how do I play this game?
Mhm.
Like, what are the rules? How do I dribble this thing?" So it's like, it's hard to instill a competitive spirit if they don't really know the game yet and
Mhm.
their focus is on other things.
Yeah, if they're really young.
If they're really young. And we don't know how young
I just
this
assumed
is.
it was like high school, but that's
Yeah.
fair. Like he could be or she could be
And the only
coaching.
reason I say that is because like if I were in Nick's place and Nick is coaching a youth t-ball team, I'm there to win championships.
Yeah, I know.
Like I'm keeping score. Like when our nephew was playing, like I don't even know what you call the league, but like basketball where the ball is smaller and the hoops are down lower. It's like not even a league, but
Like mini league.
Mini league.
Yeah.
I would get to the game, and my brother would go, it's 16-12 right now. Nico has 10 points, 5 assists, and I'm like, there's no scoreboard.
Yeah.
Like, but he was keeping stats because of his competitiveness
Mhm.
that then was passed down to his son,
Yeah.
to our nephew, to have that. So like, I get that. Like, if I was coaching, I'd be the same way of like, hey guys, I know there's not a scoreboard and we're not keeping score, but we won today.
Mhm.
And we didn't win because you showed up. We won because we scored more points than the other team.
This is not a participation
And-
trophy team.
and because you showed up,
Yeah.
but we also got more points. So like that is a win. So
Mhm.
I like that's why I look at this as like this could be teenagers, this could be 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
But I get it from a coaching perspective of like, hey, I love this sport. I want my kid involved, or I'm giving back to the sport by coaching these young athletes. Like I want us to win because of how much I care about the
Mhm.
sport.
So there is something to be said. I don't know if you caught it in there, Nick, but there's something to be said about some people are, I wouldn't say born with it,
Mhm.
but they grow up in an environment that cultivates it, I would say in their home.
Yeah.
Some kids don't have that. I would say my I had that growing up, but I would argue that my sister's kids don't have that.
Mhm.
Like there is not that like competitive athletic drive that like we had in my house growing up and that some of my other nieces and nephews have, and that's okay. You can still, the question is like, can they do it? And
Right.
like you can still cultivate that. It's just the environment in the home cultivated it before you coached them, and for others it didn't, and now you get to coach them.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because like we can use that example, like because you have 3 sisters,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say like, okay, genetically, there's a lot of similarities between this if we looked at like the sample size, and I would say that like some of the nieces and nephews are very competitive and some are not, and genetically they're very similar, but the cultural norms in their home in which they grew up with are different than each other. And one's not right and one's not wrong. It's just different.
Yeah.
Just different upbringings, different values, different priorities. And that's fine.
And different parents. Like
Different parents.
there's all different dads in that situation.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, great point of bringing that to the surface, and then continuing on this. I think the second part of the question was like, can I teach this or like instill this into them? I'm going to try to explain this the best that I can and help me clarify any muddy parts
Sure.
of it. But I would typically say that like you can't want it more than your team,
The team you're coaching.
the team you're coaching. But the reality is that you can, like as a coach, you can want it more than your players do. You can want to win the championship more than your players do. But if that's the case, like you can expect them to be as passionate about it as you are, right? Because that's what we talk about all the time is what's the reality, what's the expectation. And if the expectation that you have is that they want to win as bad as you do, and their reality is they're just happy to be there, like you're going to continue to be disappointed because their reality is not what you're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And early in my career, I have had this where it's like I'd be working with an athlete and I would want their healing more than they would.
Mm-hmm.
And I would pour my everything I had into this rehab and I would be like, man, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? It's not what I'm missing, it's what the athlete desires are.
Mm-hmm.
And some athletes I worked with, they liked their sport, but they were burnt out from it. And having this injury and prolonging the rehab made it where they get more of a rest break before going back into that sport. So I can't want it. Sorry, let me say it again. I can want it more, but I can't expect them
Yeah.
to want it as bad as I do because that violates hope, which is self-agency. And I'm not saying that this athlete didn't have self-agency. They had self-agency. Their goal was different than what my goal was.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a dynamic here of like, you got to sit down with your team captains, you got to sit down with your team, and you got to say, like, what are your guys' goals in this? What do you want out of this? Because once I know what you want out of this, now we can become competitive in the areas that you want to be competitive in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a disdain for math, you're not going to be competitive in math.
Mm-hmm.
So like as much as you say like, let's hit the calculator,
Yeah.
sharpen the pencils, get out the calculator, like that person still is not going to be competitive in math because it's not what they care about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in order for us to be competitive, in order to instill a competitive spirit into somebody, they have to be chasing something that they are passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to the youth athlete point, like they don't know what they're passionate about yet.
Right.
They're trying different things. And hey, you may have played basketball, hockey, football, rugby, whatever it may be, and wrestling, and you want your kid to follow your passions, but that kid may have a different passion.
Mm-hmm.
And you may look at it and be like, man, they're not competitive. No, they're not interested in what you want them to be interested in. They're interested in what they're interested in and what they want to become. You know, I look at like Serena and Venus Williams.
Yeah.
And the barriers that they broke and their coach, you know, King Richard and all that they went through to get to where they're at. And I look at it and I'm like, yes, they had the upbringing, they had a sole focus on it, but they also enjoyed what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't progress if you don't have that factor of being passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a 4-year-old in T-ball, I'm sorry, some are going to be more passionate about the flowers growing in the grass than a baseball coming at their face.
Yeah.
As they get older, that may change a little bit. So, you know, depending on the level that you're at, like let them grow, figure out what are the goals that they have. Like maybe their goal is just to like catch a ball. Like, okay, so let's be competitive about catching a ball instead of being competitive about the overall score of the game. So making sure that you guys are on the same page of that outcome. Go ahead.
I would argue there's definitely a percentage difference between like a collegiate athlete and an elementary school athlete, obviously, because of the learning and things like that. You would assume that a collegiate athlete would have that competitive drive, but I would say that that may not even be the case still. Like they might be there because they want to win, but that doesn't mean that they have that like that next level switch. And I think that like there's few things in sports that I love more than watching like two basketball defenders attacking and like trapping, and not just trapping but like yelling to kind of scare the person with the ball. Like that, I love that type of switch in basketball. But I see competitive basketball players and they don't have that. And so it's interesting because I do think that they're, depending on the level, as a coach, you can lay out and communicate with your captains, as you were saying, and with the whole team, like your expectation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people are going to have that like killer switch. You know what I mean?
Right. And it comes down to knowing your team, as in like each individual player, what drives them, and what do they want out of this whole thing, because there's some really high level, even professional athletes, that their competitive drive is not to be great. It's not for greatness. If it was, their behaviors off the court or field or ice would be a lot different than what it is. Their competitive drive is a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
Like their competitive drive is to pay the bills for their family, to get their community in a better place. And if you know that as a coach, well, now you can use that. Because
Mm-hmm.
now you're not going to that athlete and go, hey, we got a chance to go to playoffs. Like, we got to just work a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's a playoff bonus in this that you can use to help your family more.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going to turn the switch for that person. And then I think for a person to be competitive, because we look at competitive and like we know competitive people, we're competitive. But the reason that I think that you become competitive is because you were competitive at one point in your life and got an outcome
Mm.
that then taught you that if I continue to be competitive, then I can achieve this outcome that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that like competitiveness is like you don't want to have regrets. You don't want to leave anything out there.
Mm-hmm.
So then that type of mentality, like you're able to bring that to a lot of different domains in your life if you've had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at a team that they haven't won a game in 3 years and they're like, yeah, no, I tried to work hard and guess what? We still kind of stink.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to find the different outcome
Mm-hmm.
of it is like, what can we focus on in this practice, in this moment for there to be something that you work hard and there is a victory on that.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I don't want to say a win, but a victory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because like when we think of like scoreboard, and I do think scoreboards matter, but the victory in the sense of like, hey, you haven't dove on the court the entire year and you just dove for a loose ball in practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like praise that. Like
Yeah.
great, there's victory. Boom. Now we can drive that competition. So you got to know what is driving this individual
Mm-hmm.
because the reality is as much as you or we or whoever may love that sport, the reality is like this person may be passionate enough about it and talented enough and works hard enough, but it's a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of like some three sport athletes that, they end up getting to the pro level and they got to the pro level and they lasted like a year, not
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't good enough, not because they weren't putting up numbers, but because they're like, I do not enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, trying to be competitive about something that you're not enjoying, I just don't see how that
Mm-hmm.
happens.
I like that you brought up the like it's almost like incentives,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you said praising the person who dove on the floor. I got an opportunity to coach with someone who had the incentive of free Frosties. And so anytime someone during a game took a charge, the whole team would get free Frosties from
Yeah.
Wendy's after. And it was so funny because I would be like, I'm on the bench with the guys and I'm coaching with them, taking stats, and as soon as someone would get that, I would just go free Frosties to like
Yeah.
whoever was next to me and they'd freak out and get so excited. And so even like little things like that I think go a long way. But I just want to encourage Nick as a whole because as a coach, there's a level of humility of like, hey, what I'm doing and what I want from this team, it's just not working. And
Mm-hmm.
how do I adjust and adapt to this? Because like I want them to be a certain way and they're just not. And
Yeah.
so how do I adjust and adapt? And like I love the humility of this question of like, hey, do you have any tips? Because like I kind of need help here. And so hopefully these tips did help you. And
Yeah.
when in doubt, offer Frosties.
Offer Frosties, and I feel like I always have 2 quick points after you share a good point that like adds to it, but it's
That's
just
fair.
stories get brewing, and I'm like, I gotta spit it out.
Brew it up.
Get them brewing. So when I played football, one of the incentives was if you had an interception, returned it for a touchdown, a pick six, the coach would bring you Gatorade the next day at practice.
Mm.
And there was this one team we were playing, and we were blowing them out. And it was like third quarter, and I had a pick six.
Mm.
And I was also the kickoff. I was kick return and the kickoff, like the kicker. And so you go, you score the touchdown, and you do the extra point, and then you come out on the field in your huddle for the kickoff, and the ref hands you the ball to put on the tee. And throughout the game, like the ref and I were just like having fun, like just chatting back and forth and this and that. So he hands me the ball, and he just goes, "Why'd you have to do that? If you guys are up by 40, you really had to like return that all the way for like a pick six." And I was like, you don't get it. And he goes, what do I get? I go, I get a Gatorade tomorrow because of that. And he was like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, heck yeah,
I love
Gatorade,
that.
like, let's go. And then I look at another sport I played, and also too, there is a challenge. And like you said, Nick has like phenomenal humility for asking this question. But like, if you come from a particular culture and you're implementing into a new one, but this is the way it's always been done, and you have to change and adapt to it, like one, that's going to make you a better coach than you ever would have imagined. But it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
We in baseball, we had a coach that we did not get along with, but he came from this culture where in baseball practice every single day it was expected that you were in full uniform, your shirts were tucked in, bags were lined up, and like everything was very, very, very detail oriented and everything mattered. We came from the culture that baseball is like the third sport that you play at the end of a hard football season, end of a hard wrestling basketball season. Like baseball is like, hey, you go out, you have batting practice, you shag some balls in the field and you play the game, but it's like not intense.
Mm-hmm.
Where this guy came from, like college baseball, where it was like very intense and there's lifting and running and like rules and regulations and disciplines. And we didn't, our team did not vibe with that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, we were still a good baseball team. And he's like, if we win and we get medals, we throw them in the trash because that's not the one that we want. We want the one at the end of the year. Like we want that section championship. We want those medals. And we're like, dude, if we win the league, we're not throwing our medals in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like, yeah, we can do more, but that's pretty cool for us to win the league. So yeah, we're not going to do that. But that's not the culture that he came from.
Yeah.
He came from this other one. And the issue was that there was no middle ground. It was like he was sticking with his way, we were sticking with our way, and it clashed. It clashed the entire time. There was so much friction. There was no give or take. And I think, hey, if you're in a professional sport and these people are getting paid for it and you're the coach, like you can have it be your way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working with young athletes, like, yes, you have to have your ways, but you got to meet them in the middle sometimes or somewhere, have some type of neutral ground, or it's just going to be clashing the entire season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think like it's hard to instill humility in young athletes. And so too, like in my head, I'm like, "Ugh, you were being stubborn, the coach was being stubborn, y'all should have both had humility." But the reality is like to expect the team to have humility, like they don't know yet. They're teenagers or even younger. Like they just don't know. And so it's like as a coach, you need to give a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is, Nick, just like everything we've talked about, and then just like keep setting the example. You know, we talked about like congruency, incongruency. If you want your team to be competitive, but you're at practice and you're kind of like a pushover and you're not setting the tone of competition, like that's not going to trickle down. I remember I had one coach that used to join in with sprints with us at the end of practice and would join into us with like playing 3-on-3 or 5-on-5. And like you would see him play and you'd be like, okay, like let's roll. Like it's game time now. But he set the example. He never came into practice and said, today we're going to be competitive and we're going to work hard. He'd come in with energy. He'd come blowing in the whistle. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? All right, let's go layup lines. Come on, layup lines. Let's go.
Yeah.
And like, come on, that fires you up. That'll get you
going.
All right, here we go again. Get to your lines. Same drill that you can't do.
Yeah.
Let's go for like, no, set the tone.
Yeah.
Like be that person that is showing them what it is like to that, while also having some middle ground.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. What's your hope story? I already shared mine.
Okay,
the end of the sandwich.
Were you the top bun or the bottom bun? Bottom bun, because then the meat has to go on.
Yep.
And then it doesn't have to be meat, but come on. Meat, and then the top bun. So this is the top bun to the hope story. So for me, my hope story is very general. The past few podcasts, we mentioned that there's these guides and free resources, and that's my hope story, is that like I'm just so excited for these things, one, developing them, but then two, getting them out to people and helping them in their athletic journey, spirit, mind, and body. And I'm just excited because we are kind of updated our website, hopenotnope.org, and we have this tab now for athletes and free resources. And you can go to that and all the different guides that we're developing, because we're just going to keep developing them and getting out more and more free resources for people. Like they're all going to live on this web page so that athletes can go there and just click to it, download it, and then be able to use it. So I'm just excited to provide that value for people, and that yes, there'll be links in the show notes when it makes sense, but also like there's a web page that you can go and just get whatever one
Mm-hmm.
that you feel like you need for you or your team or whomever at any point.
Yeah, and in this specific show notes, we'll have the general link, not to the different guides and free resources, but to the page where this lays, because then you don't have to, go to the browser and type it in. You can just click the little link on the bottom of the show notes here. So hopefully that will help you. And as always, we're so grateful to be here with you. We have new podcasts every single Wednesday. And so if this podcast encouraged you, or if you're a coach and you know one of your coach friends is struggling with something like this, please share this podcast with one of your coach friends, because we know so many different coaches, and I know for a fact that some of this wisdom we've learned from them, but also they could really take some of it too and implement into their teams. And so if you are a coach or know a coach, go ahead and send it along.
Thank you for listening. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, but an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.